Hello everyone, Paul from Foil Drive, and today's video is going to be all about the version 3 controller. It really is a deep dive to give you all the information you'll need to know. So we've got what we believe is a really ergonomic design, easy to hold. It's not too big, it's definitely not heavy, it's nice and lightweight. We've introduced a removable throttle guard. So there's actually two throttle guards that come in the kit. There's a big one and a sort of like a narrower, smaller one. The ruggedization has been a big change. We've made this thing considerably more durable from impacts and just spending its life probably in salt water. So the electronics and PCB design has been totally redesigned from scratch. There is nothing in here that resides from what we've done in the past. It's totally new. One of the big changes is the throttle mode, how the controller is actually used. So we're going to go into that in much better detail about how you use the trigger. So there's conventional throttle, and then there's also gear mode, and then there's an individual boost button, which we'll get into. We've also incorporated a GPS in the V3 controller, so that GPS is obviously going to give you things like your distance, your current speed, your top speed, and that kind of information. And in future, that'll expand out into the Foil Drive app. We can do more things with that. We'll get into that later. And we've also incorporated a Bluetooth connection to the phone. So your Foil Drive app will be able to update the V3 controller in the future. As we release more features and user feedback comes in, we now have the ability to flash the controller, much like you flash the Fusion or other Gen 2 units, and it has newer firmware on top, and it continues to improve over time with features. So the V3 controller also has a really bright screen. It's a lot easier to see in the sunlight, and that has also meant we have a bigger screen, which means we can fit more information on each page. So we're going to go through that now quickly. Page 1 has the critical stuff like your battery voltage. At the moment, this is reading it's 88% state of charge for the Fusion battery. And there's also like a coarse battery like icon as well. Below that, the T indicates that it is in throttle mode. If I was in a gear mode, it would be a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. But at the moment, I'm in throttle mode. And next to that, it says lock, which means the controller is locked. It's the first time I've turned the unit on. I need to unlock that. And then to do that, you just press and hold B. And now the unit is unlocked. And if I was to do the throttle, that percentage that's going up and down in the bottom right-hand corner is your throttle. So the next page, if I click B, B allows me to scroll through the pages. I have got session time, so that's in minutes, how long you've been, or how long the controller's been on for. Then I have my current speed in kilometers or miles an hour. You can change from metric to imperial. And then we've got the current distance traveled. Again, metric imperial distance as you choose on the menu. So go to the next page. We've got the top speed of your session. So see how fast you dare to go. The current wattage. So this is a new one that I deliberately put in there so you can see the amount of power you're consuming at any one time. It can be quite useful if you're trying to really dial in a wing or a board or a combination or something, and sometimes you can see you're using more or less power by looking at that in real time. And then there's the temperature of the main unit, which you don't really need to look at a huge amount, but some of these pieces of information are very useful for fault finding or just getting understanding to the support staff of to what your system's doing. The last page is the current motor RPM, so how fast your motor is spinning under the water. We've got how many amps the system is drawing and the voltage of the system. You could spend most of your sessions on page 1 and have no real need to leave it, but all those extra features and data is available if you do want to look at it. A common theme that is on the controller at all times is the top row, so it doesn't matter what page you're on. This stays the same. In the top left-hand corner is the signal quality between the remote and the box. There's a bunch of little bars here. If the bars are dropping down or disappearing, you have less signal quality. If they're all the way up, it means you have maximum signal quality. Much like a phone, it works the same way. The GPS, it'll only show up if you've turned it on. That's basically saying GPS is on and it's looking for satellites and functioning. And then in the extreme top right-hand corner, there is the battery for the remote. It's got nothing to do with the battery for the unit, it's the battery for the controller. That would normally be full and it's fully charged, and like a phone, as you're using it, it drops down in bars towards 0. The controller comes in this nice case, and it has an instruction manual. This is actually quite detailed. We've put a lot of effort into this because we know that the V3 controller has got lots of features. So I really encourage people that have bought the V3 controller to read this and refer to all the information that is on it before necessarily contacting support if you've got questions, because we're going to do the best we can to put all the information in here. And as with 4-wheel drive, we've got lots of QR codes which we're going to link to articles and videos and other bits and pieces. So this is a fantastic source of truth to get your head around V3 controller and all the features. So please refer to this as your first port of call. This video would also suffice, and support is always there if needed. It also comes with the wrist strap, as you'd expect, and the induction charging pad, USB, and the different trigger guard, which is a slightly different shape to the one that's on there. So, and the 1.5mm Allen key that takes those bolts out. So they're the accessories that come with the V3 controller, but I just want to make sure, please have a look at the manual. It's full of extremely useful information. So let's go back a step. How do you turn the controller on? Well, it's fortunately the same way to turn it off. Press and hold the power button, which is the plus. So when I press and hold plus for a few seconds, we've made it a slightly longer press this to really make sure it's a deliberate action to turn it on and off. So for turning it off, same thing, press and hold the plus button and it will turn off. To get into menus, you simply press the positive and negative at the same time, and then you'll get into the menu. So I'll do that now. And now I'm in the menus. Quite a list there. They all have their own use. Luckily, you don't need to use them all, but we've really taken a lot of information and feedback from customers for over 5 years and tried to cram as much of it in as we can. So let's get into it. Pairing. So if you have a V3 controller and you buy it with a Fusion, it will already be paired. But if you need to pair the V3 controller with any 4-wheel drive system, Assist, Assist Plus, Slim, Max, or Fusion, this controller can talk to all of them. To pair, it's really simple. Go to pair, press the B button to select that menu, and it now says reconnect battery. So let's do that now. So I've got the controller there. When I plug the battery into this controller, because it's looking for a unit, it should link up. You see it, the text changed, and now it says pairing complete. So now that the pairing is complete, I can hold the negative button, and I am now back to the main sort of like operating mode, and I'm now connected. And I know I'm connected because I can see the little signal bars in the top left-hand corner. So it's now connected, off I go. Little quick note, it does say lock because it will auto lock the first time it connects. We can turn all that off, we'll get into that later, but it says lock for good reason. A quick tip about pairing, make sure that you notify other 4-wheel drive users around you if you are pairing, because if there's multiple boxes around you and you put it into pairing mode and they just so happen to plug their unit in, their battery in, it might try and pair to their box. So rule of thumb is just let people know around your pairing, get as close as you can to your unit as you're plugging the battery in, because it will always try and choose the closest Bluetooth signal and connect to that. Menu number 2, so how do I go up and down in menus? It's simply press the negative and positive buttons, allows you to scroll up and down. So menu number 2 is calibration. You really only ever need to use calibration if you notice that the throttle doesn't seem to return to 0 properly, or won't go all the way through to 100% travel if you've programmed the controller to allow you to go through to 100% travel. But effectively, if you're ever having troubles with the unit not seeing 0% throttle, the motor won't run. For example, if you've got sand and grit and stuff in your radio, in your controller, and the trigger can't actually physically return all the way to zero, that's not an instance where you would calibrate. That's just debris that are physically in the way. But if the trigger can move freely and it won't return to zero, if you calibrate it, it will relearn the new throttle range. So for example, let's do it. So I'm on calibration, I press the B button. It says pull throttle. So I pull the throttle all the way down. It says calibrating, and now it says complete. I'll do that again, calibrating, and then it goes straight to complete. Once it's done, it automatically just exits out of the menu and goes back to where it needs to be. If I was to then hold the negative button down, hold the B button to unlock the unit in this instance, and I pull the trigger, it goes from 0 all the way through to 100. And again, I have kept the programming to allow it to go to 100. So there we go. That is now calibrated and ready to go. If you're having any issues with the controller not wanting to calibrate, it might be that the magnet or the trigger isn't able to go through the normal range, which again, you might need to take the cover off and inspect it to see if there's any debris or shells or sand or something in there that's preventing the trigger from moving. Further than that, sometimes a factory reset can fix the problem. It's a bit like a computer that just starts acting up, and for no good reason, you just restart it and it comes good again. That can also be the thing. Anything past that, it could be a support question, but recalibration, inspect for debris or anything in there, and or a factory reset, and how to do that will be a separate factory reset chapter. Next one is the throttle mode. Now this is probably going to be the biggest subject matter out of the whole video and the most questions around it, so let's get into it. Scroll down throttle mode, press B, and it gives me trigger or gear. So trigger is implying that all the throttle is done by simply working with the trigger. So let's do that. I got a little asterisk next to it, so that's already selected. So if I press the negative button, it goes down to gear and vice versa. So I'm going to press trigger, press B on it, and then hold the negative button, press it twice to get out. And I know I'm in trigger mode because it says T for trigger. So really easy, as I pull the throttle, I get linear throttle command. Right, simple as that. Remember, normal throttle range is from 0 to 95%. 95 to 100, anywhere between 100 and 95, is where you are activating boost. The amount of boost in percentage you get and the time that you get it for and how long it lasts is all programmable in the four-wheel drive app. So when you go from 95 to 100, you are activating boost. Once it's been consumed, it times out and you can't use it again until you come off the throttle for at least 6 seconds. The truth of the matter is you can actually come off the throttle, and as long as you're below 50% throttle, so between 50 and 100, for more than 6 seconds, boost will reactivate and you can go again. But the simplest way to think about it is if you want boost back, which is normally used to get you onto foil, just take your finger off the throttle, count to 10 and have another go. Going back into throttle mode, gear. This is a whole different way of working with the controller, and it's new to four-wheel drive. So press the negative again, and now I'm back out. See, it says G and then 1, gear 1. If I press the plus button, gear 2, gear 3, gear 4, gear 5. All 5 gears are fully programmable, and you can program them to exactly the percentage that you want the gear to finish at. So if I pull full throttle, you will see that the throttle finishes at 55%. And if I press the positive button, whilst holding the throttle down, it says 65, 75, 85, 95. These are just a factory number that we've put in there. Again, you can change it to whatever you like. Effectively, a gear is just where the throttle map finishes. The reason the gear mode in conjunction with the B button is quite useful is thus. If you're trying to get onto foil, 65% throttle for me is not enough thrust with smaller wings and boards to get onto foil. I could do two things. One is I could just turn the gear up and give myself more throttle, and then turn the gears down when I'm up and foiling, which, you know, that requires me pressing buttons and thinking about it. Or I can say, let's say I'm happy with 65% throttle, I just want to go for a cruise. I can slam the throttle, go to 65%, and then I actually use the base of my thumb, I just rest it down on the B button. When I do that, you can see the throttle. If I did that, you can't see it, so I'll do it like this. You can see that the throttle jumps up to 100%. And when I let it go, it goes away. On, off, on, off. The B button says, I'm going to take you all the way up to 100% whilst I'm depressed. As soon as you let it go, it goes back to whatever you program the gear mode to. This is really useful if you want to have, if you don't want to have as much control over your finger. For example, I want to get going on my board, I slam the throttle, I grab the rails of the board, I get moving and get going, then I hit the B button, boop, get boost, I pick up a lot of speed, I start skipping across the top of the water, oh, it's too fast. I let the B button off, and then the board goes back to a more sedate power level, but I don't have to have any finger fidelity. I just keep my hands squished on the throttle. I can push up off the board, get to my feet, stand up on it, and then get ready to pop up and foil away without having to be accurate with my finger. I can just set and forget, basically. If I need a little bit more power, I just tap the plus button and I get the next gear. So it's kind of a way of decoupling you having to have an accurate finger and still giving you access to full power when you want it at the press of a button. Hopefully that makes sense, but they are two different ways of kind of doing the same thing. If I was in throttle mode, you can still do the same thing, full throttle, get up to speed, start planing along, and then you try and sort of let your finger off a bit and let the throttle come down. It does the same sort of thing, but it does require accuracy with your finger. Fusion's quite powerful. If you're moving around and you're jittering with your finger, you're going to get surges of thrust. So that's what gear mode's all about. Let's get into the next one. So as we just discussed in the last one, the gears, you can program the gears to whatever value you want. You can also program the end value of throttle. So if I go into throttle mapping, I press B, you can see it says gear mode G1 055, G2 065. So that's saying gear 1 is 55%, gear 2 is 65, gear 3 75, gear 4 85, gear 5 95. Press B on any of the gears, the number starts flashing, and you simply press up or down to change the value. You now need to think, all right, well, what should my gear be? What's the right value? Now that's going to depend on what you're doing with it. So all I'm going to do is give you a rundown of how I use it and how I set it up for my 11-year-old son. So how do I use it? Gear 1, I normally set that down to about, I don't know, 30%, something like that, quite a low value. What purpose does that serve? When I'm getting in and out of the water and I'm very close to the beach, I put it on gear 1, so it's not going to be powerful, but it's enough throttle that I can maneuver around rocks or sandbars and bits and pieces and do it at a nice, slow, consistent pace, and I don't have to worry about where my finger is at. Once I'm out in the water, kind of useless to me, I don't really use it past that. Gear 2, I will set the throttle for me personally. I think the lowest I use is about 65 to 67. Let's just say I'm going to choose 65 is a low cruise. Now I actually make gear modes 2, 3 and 4 quite close together. Why do I do that? I'll explain it. So let's go down to gear 3. So I've got 65 for 2. Oops. I'm going to make gear 3 68, only 3% more. That's weird. Why would I do that? I'll tell you in a sec. Gear 4, I'm going to make that about 74. And gear 5, I'm going to leave at 90. The reason why I have 2, 3 and 4 only a few percentages apart is on Fusion, on the wings I ride, on the board I have, Between that 65 and sort of 74 is a really sweet spot for plenty of thrust to be able to maneuver around and get places, but I'm never overdriving the system. When you've got this much extra thrust and power on tap, if you get carried away with just pulling that trigger and just boosting around, you're going to consume battery quicker and unnecessarily. But also I find I don't have to think about it as much anymore. I can just slam my finger and cruise. I still back it off every now and then to go a little bit slower here, there and whatever, but I just find it's good. The other reason is, as the battery voltage reduces in state of charge and the voltage starts to drop, the thrust I used to get from 65% throttle, maybe halfway through the discharge of the battery, is not as much as I got at the start as I do when it's half depleted. And I find I'm going to give it that extra gear and give myself a few extra percent. It's not much, but a few extra percent throttle. The voltage is dropped, so that allows me to put a few more amps into the motor, and it feels the same deeper into the discharge of the battery as it once did at the start. So that's why I have those three gears quite close. It means that feeling of predictable thrust and what I expect from the motor is basically the same for the whole discharge of the battery, down to about 15%. Once it goes below that, then you'll just need exponentially more because the battery's really starting to drop. And gear 5 at 90%, sometimes I'm just like, all right, I want to go, I want to get somewhere quick, but I don't want the full boost. So I'll click up to gear 5, get out there, do something quick. And then on top of that, if I ever need a real surge of power in any gear, I can mash the B button and get the full 100% plus boost. An example of when I would do that, a few weeks ago I was out doing some testing and foiling around, and a really big set was coming. And it's like, I need to get an extra 200 meters further out to get ready to catch this thing. So I put it up to gear 5 and I just shot out there as quickly as I could. As I turned to get onto the wave, I actually missed the crest and I fell off the back of it. I didn't fall off, I was behind the wave. And I then mashed the B button, which gave me boost as well. And it pushed me over the top of the wave lip, down the face, and I could catch it. So it was a bit of like a combination of, I actually used all three, cruising around, oh, need more power, a few extra gears, oh, need extra power for this instant. I need to use B for about 2 seconds, and it pushed me over the top and I got in front of it. So it's very intuitive. Once you get used to using it, it makes sense, and I think you'll enjoy the new feature. How would I set this up for my 11-year-old? He weighs a third of what I weigh, so he doesn't need anywhere near the power that I have. I would probably recommend going to a throttle mode and turning the throttle down to limit them to a safe level. For example, for my boy, he doesn't need anything more than about 48% throttle. He certainly doesn't need boost, and I don't want him having access to boost. So I put him on throttle mode, take away all the gears, all the boost buttons, and he can just have the throttle that I prescribe to him as the right amount. So to do that, I would jump back up to throttle mode. I have to put it into trigger mode. And then I drop down to throttle mapping again. And this time it gets rid of the gears and it says throttle mode, and it just says 100 at the moment. Oh, my apologies. Press B on it to select it, starts flashing, and then I turn it down for him. About 48% is all he needs. Press the B, it stops flashing. Press and hold negative, press and hold negative, and now I'm back to the throttle page, and you can see when I pull the full trigger, it only goes to 48%. If I touch boost, it won't work. And you can see it's now actually scrolling through the menus. When you've got the throttle set to 100% and you pull the trigger all the way through, it detects that you've got the trigger pulled all the way through and the mapping is high enough to engage boost. When you deliberately limit the throttle range, it's designed to take the boost away because it's assuming you don't want people having access to all that extra power. So if you do need to have a very low throttle setting, but you do need boost, use gear mode. Use the gears, set all the gears, and then just tell that person when and only when you need it. Press the B button and you'll get access to that power. If you want to prevent people from having it, like I don't want my kid having access to it, I put it in throttle mode. The V3 controller can work with every single four-wheel drive system made to date. So what we've got in here, if you go to battery voltage, is the different voltages that the different systems used. And I'm going to go through those now. So the one up top, 43 volts, that is for Fusion. Obviously the Fusion batteries will have 43 volts written on it to correspond. If I go down, 40 volts is your Gen 2 batteries, with the exception of only the Slim Endurance. The next one down, the 28 volt. 28 volt is only for the Slim Endurance battery. Again, it's got 28 volts written on it. And the Assist Plus batteries, both the main battery and the travel batteries. They are all 28 volt architecture. And the last one on the list is for any customers that still have the original Assist, which use a 22 volt architecture. That's for that one. Okay, so what would happen if I chose the wrong voltage on the menu and then used the wrong system? Good news is not a whole lot, other than it might lie to you. So, for all four-wheel drive systems except for Fusion, if you choose the wrong voltage, the battery percentage displayed back to you will just be incorrect. It could lie to you. So, for example, if I set it at 28 volts and I was using a Gen 2 Max, which is a 40 volt system, it's going to tell me that my battery is like 100% for like the majority of the session. And then slowly a few percents will start dropping off as the battery's like nearly flat. The reason that is the controller is assuming you're using a different battery, and it is only telling you a percentage based on the voltage it's reading. If you have a Fusion and you set the wrong value here, it doesn't actually really matter, because if I do it now, so I'm at 28 volts and I click negative, and I get out, you'll still see that the battery remaining says 88%. The difference is with Fusion, it has a different data protocol, and the smart BMS is talking to the remote by itself and is telling you the state of charge, as opposed to trying to derive an approximate state of charge based on just the current voltage. So that leads into another little difference. With Fusion, you will not see the battery percentage go up and down when you're using the throttle. It acts like a phone, just 1% at a time, slowly going down. With the Gen 2 units, you will notice that if you pull the throttle, the percentage of battery remaining will go down when under load and then comes back up when you take your finger off, because it's just derived on the voltage of the battery. And as you put load on the battery with a motor, voltage drops and then comes back up. So hopefully that makes sense with the battery voltage and how you select it. Okay, so menu 6, GPS mode. So if we go into that, it's really on or off. There's no advantage of really turning it off. It doesn't save any battery or anything like that. So if you did want to turn it off, you can scroll down and select that, but leave it on. There's a bootloader mode for GPS. So if you double press B button, it goes into this little screen here, which really tells you what the GPS is seeing and how it's functioning. In this instance, it's telling me the antenna is okay. And at the moment, these are all zeros because it hasn't got a GPS lock. We're inside a building and it's the first time I've turned it on. I want to get this across. The first time you use the V3 controller, it's going to take about half an hour to find satellites, work out where it is, get a solid lock, and then sort of be more like repeatable in the future, turn it on, it'll lock on quicker. So if you do get your controller and the speed isn't working in distance and that sort of stuff, and it's the first few times you've used it, turn it on, let it find some satellites and let it lock on. If you're ever like worried that it's not working, you can turn this sort of bootloader mode on and you can see exactly what it's seeing. So again, if you want accurate GPS, speed and distance and that sort of stuff, I turn my remote on like 5 or 10 minutes before the session and just sort of have it on in the background, just so that when I'm ready to go to the water, I know it's good to go. So that's GPS. The GPS information is just locally stored on the remote. It doesn't go anywhere. We can't track you, or we're not really looking for any of that information anyway. But for anyone that was worried about privacy, GPS data is restored on the remote. The only way you get it off is when you connect to the app in the future and download that track data. Menu 7 is the tilt sensor. This is probably one of the reasons you're watching this video. Tilt sensor is a safety feature that we have added that people asked for. So we provided it. But if you don't read the manual and you don't know how to use the controller and you've bought a Fusion and your motor's not running, it might be because the tilt sensor is doing its job and you've just got to figure out what to do with it. So this is a throwback to anyone that's watching this video for precisely this reason. Tilt sensor, so if I go into that, it's an on or an off. The tilt sensor is programmed when it comes to how much pitch and roll the unit's allowed to have before it cuts the motor off, is programmed in the four-wheel drive app. The tilt sensor is only an on or off when it's related to the controller. Why is that? If you set your tilt sensor up to a relatively shallow pitch and roll because someone's learning, and then you go and motor out into the middle of the ocean to do a downwind run, and then there's big seas out there and you fall off, and then you get to go going again and the motor keeps cutting out because you can't catch a wave because you go past your tilt. The whole idea behind the tilt sensor function on the remote is so that you can always turn it off or on if that's what you want. So this is an on and off function. It does not program the tilt sensor in the unit. That is a separate thing on the app. So in this screen, you've got lock is coming across the screen here. Now there's lock because the tilt sensor is out of range, and there's lock because you've used throttle lock. This lock at the moment is because of the tilt sensor, and I know this because if I press and hold the B button, which I would normally do to unlock the remote for the first time, or if I'm using throttle lock, it won't let me unlock it. And that is because the tilt sensor is turned on in the remote and on in the unit, and it's doing its job. You can see the Gen 2.5 unit here is sitting flat on the desk. Now, if that was on a board, my board would be upside down right now. So if I was to roll the unit upside down and then press and hold to unlock it, it goes to 0, and now I have throttle range. I'm going to tilt the unit out of range and it goes back to lock. Put it back into range, goes back to 0. Why did I not have to use the B button to unlock it then? Because the auto lock is on when you first turn the controller on, or if you lose signal. You can turn that off and just have the tilt sensor do its own thing, and we're going to go into that next. But again, tilt it out of range, locks, back into range, unlocks. If I hold the throttle down and I tilt out of range, it locks, and then it comes back into range, and I've kept my finger depressed to where it was. You'll see how it reads 0. The motor will not start unless you release your finger off the throttle, let it go back to 0, and then it will run. So if you're holding throttle, board tilts off, tilts up, or pitches, whatever, rolls, locks itself, you keep your finger on the throttle, it comes back into range, no, it's not going, let the trigger off, let it latch back to 0, and then it'll function again. Lock on start. So we just talked about the tilt sensor and how that can lock and unlock the motor. The lock on start, so if I press on that, it's an on or an off choice. So the first time you turn your remote on, it's locked. It asks you to unlock it. If I turn this off, it gets rid of that feature. So let's simulate that. So at the moment it's on. I'm going to go out. My unit is flipped the right way up, so I'm not invoking the tilt lock because it's assuming it's flat on a beach level. So let's turn the remote off. Turn it back on. See, it says lock because it's the first time I've turned it on. press and hold the B button, 1, 2, 3, 4, unlocks. Now I've got 0% and I've got my throttle back. So that is just a safety feature. You're telling the controller, hey, I've turned you on and I know you're on, and now I'm deliberately unlocking you by pressing and holding the B button. It's a safety feature, people ask for it, here it is. I suggest you use it. Little trick, if you've got the tilt sensor activated and the throttle lock on, you can get confused as to which one you're trying to turn off. So just remember, if you're pressing and holding the B button and the damn thing's not unlocking and I'm getting grumpy, I want to get in the water, is your tilt lock on? And is your board upside down or the wrong way around? So if you're ever really unsure and you just want to get in the water and go foiling and nothing's working, you can try turning the throttle lock off and the tilt sensor off, and it'll probably just all go away and you can use it, and then you can figure out after your session. I've been there when we were first programming it, but that is normally where people trip up. They don't know which one they've turned on or off. Menu 9 is Throttle Auto Lock. If I click in that, at the moment it's off. It is off by default. I use this for when I'm teaching people how to foil, because there's enough going on trying to learn how to stand on a foil board, and making it easier for them to just forget about having to remember when I'm pulling trigger or not helps. So for example, if I want to turn it on, I press the B button, it starts flashing, and if I press up or down, I am adding seconds. Now it can be anywhere from 0 to 100 seconds. Let's choose 6 seconds. Right, press B to select that. I'm going to go out of the menu. At the moment, see, it just went to lock. So press and hold the B button. It unlocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it locked again. That 6 seconds is, if I don't touch the throttle for within 6 seconds, it will automatically lock again. So where is this useful? So I'm in the water, I'm teaching someone to foil, be careful of the propeller, be careful of the board and the wings and all that sort of stuff. When you're ready to go, climb onto the board, get ready. When you're ready and out of the water and safe, unlock the controller, then try foiling. So you would instruct them, when you're ready, press and hold 1, 2, 3, that unlocks. Then you can start using throttle, moving around, trying to get going. Boom, fall in the water, you let go of the controller. The tilt sensor's probably already cut you off anyway. But the idea behind the 6 seconds in this instance is, by the time I fall in the water and regather myself and sort of get ready to get back over the board, even if I've turned the tilt sensor off and that wasn't activating, I still have the safety of the controller's not going to do anything if I haven't played with it in that 6 seconds. Now 6 seconds is quite restrictive, but it's also just a number I've found that's like, people do tend to touch the throttle, but within that 6 seconds, if it's lapsed, it doesn't do anything. It is annoying and it is frustrating to use, but it does add safety. And I just do it as a mandatory for anyone that's learning to foil. Put the throttle lock on. I know it's annoying, every time you fall off you have to unlock it. Too bad, it's a safety thing and it's worth doing. Do I use this in the surf? Me personally, no. Because if I fall off on a big wave and I surface and then there's another big set coming, the last thing I want to be doing is trying to clamber to my board and then to be sitting waiting for 3 seconds that hopefully that wave doesn't break on me and get going again. Competent user, I know how to use the product, I'm capable of foiling. So for me, this safety feature doesn't actually give me what I want in that instance, but it could be very useful for people that are learning to foil, schools, young children, whatever it is. It's a great feature and I highly recommend you consider using it. Okay, menu 10 is cruise control. So feature that I don't really use that much, but it is there. Cruise control is exactly like your car. It allows you to set a pre-described value and it means you don't have to use the controller. Pretty straightforward. At the moment I've got it set to 44. It will come turned off as standard. So if I press the B button to select it, I can simply scroll up and down to the percentage I want. So it will come as off. In this instance, let's say I'm going to choose 45%. Press that, it's no longer flashing, it's selected. Negative, negative. Now how do I use it? Cruise control will only work if it can see the unit and it is connected. And I'm in throttle mode. It doesn't work in gear mode. You press and hold the negative, but there's a catch. You do have to have some level of trigger pull, and it needs to be past 20%. The reason we do this is we just don't want people accidentally activating cruise control by pressing the button by mistake. So I'm going to pull the throttle. Let's say I've chosen 60%. And then I press and hold the negative button. See how it jumped to 45? And my finger's still there. If I let it go, it's stuck on 45. So now it is cruising at 45% throttle. To deactivate cruise, you simply touch the trigger. Do it again, put it back on, press the negative button. Boom, it's gone to 45. And if I touch any button, the negative, it cuts it off. Do it again. Touch the positive button, it cuts it off. Do it again. Press the B button, it changes menu, but it does cut the throttle off. So effectively, you can kill the cruise control at any time by touching the throttle, the gear, all the buttons. It just boop, goes away. A bit like a car, set it, dab the brake, it turns off. So hopefully that's useful to some people. Be mindful, if you're using cruise control, it is your responsibility to activate it and it is your responsibility to deactivate it. If the signal from the remote is connected to the box and it is getting a command to operate at 45% throttle, it's going to do that. If your tilt sensor is on and you fall off and cruise control is running and it goes out of range, the motor will automatically shut off by itself. You resurface, you come back up, board goes back into tilt range, it won't run. You will need to deactivate cruise control, go back to 0% throttle and reactivate it, all for safety and for logical reasons. Menu 11 is units. This is a simple one. Click on that. You can choose between imperial or metric. Pretty straightforward. Menu 12 is screen sleep, which is a feature we put in there for those that just want maximum runtime out of their controller. So if we go into that, it's either on or off. If you leave it off, the controller will always stay on in the form of like the screen will always be on. This does not turn the controller off. This just shuts the screen down to save power. So I actually recommend putting it on because there's plenty of times throughout a session where you're not using the controller. You might be resting, getting ready, walking to the beach, walking away from the beach, doing anything. If you're not using it, there's not much point in having the screen blaring away and wasting power. So if you turn it on, click B, it is now going to go to sleep effectively for the screen. So now that that's on, if I go out and we wait a few seconds, pause for effect. We need some hold music. Do, 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 do. And it's not doing it. There it is. So now it's gone to sleep. So the controller's still on. I still have connectivity to the box, but if I was to touch the throttle or any of the buttons, it turns back on and it continues to work. It's a bit like a screensaver on a computer. Turning this feature on or off will have a direct impact on how long the controller lasts. So unlike turning the GPS on or off makes no difference, this will. Obviously it depends on how frequently or infrequently you're using the controller, but by turning this on, you could get additional hours of use out of it versus not. So I recommend turning it on. The reason it's not on from the factory is we don't want people getting confused as to my controller's died or it keeps turning off or whatever. So from a simplicity's sake, comes off, I recommend turn it on. Menu 13 is brightness. Again, similar to the menu 12 where we talked about screen sleep. This is a battery saving initiative. The screen is super bright on level 3, but wait, there's more. You can turn the brightness up. So if I go positive, it's even brighter. Negative, it's less bright. If you want maximum runtime, obviously make it duller. It uses less power, you get even longer runtime. If you want more, turn it up. I find 3 is a perfect setting. I don't really need anything more than that. But if it's a glaringly bright day, sure, turn it up. For the four-wheel drive enthusiasts that just can't get enough, those people know who they are, they might turn it down and just get maximum session time. So yeah, the controller runs for many, 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 many hours. Shout out to Pyros. You can foil until your next knee blows out. Menu 14, auto power off. So like menu 12 and 13, a power saving initiatives, this is another one. If you leave your controller on and you forget to turn it off, it sucks to come back and find you got a flat controller. But if you turn it on, you press the B button, you can scroll anywhere through from 1 to 60 minutes. After that time period has lapsed and you have not interacted with the controller, it will shut itself down automatically. It's actually quite useful. It's not the end of the world if the controller turns itself off and you're out in the water. You can simply just turn it back on. I actually set mine to about 15 minutes because there's been plenty of times where I have come out of the water, I'm a bit preoccupied, and I leave the controller on unnecessarily. So turn it on, choose a time, and then it will automatically turn itself off. Menu 15 is factory reset. So this can solve like weird problems. When I say weird problems, this is a little mini computer, much like real computers. Sometimes they just have something go wrong and you just need to turn them off and back on again. Factory reset can achieve that, but it can also achieve the result of like, if I just want it to go back to the factory settings that comes in the manual, you can do the same thing. So if I want to do that, I press B on it and I simply press B again, whoop, and it is now factory resetting. It'll automatically reboot the controller and automatically turn it back on for you, assuming you're trying to solve a problem. And last and final, menu 16, which is regulation information. So if I click on that, it really just instructs you to turn the controller around and scan the QR code to take you to regulatory information, which might be important for the place you live in the world. So I'm not going to go through all that. That's available online. If you need any of that, that's where it is. Okay, so that summarizes the V3 controller sort of deep dive. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. And we hope that anyone that watches this finds the information useful. Have fun with your new V3 remote.